I'm so sorry for everyone who is actively witnessing the tragedy that is occurring on camera right now. I am as red as a tomato. I am as juicy as a juicy tomato. I am so hot and red. I basically fell asleep in the sun today. It's really fucking sunny here. I mean, I'm sunburnt, so I look pretty disgusting, but that's not what we're here to talk about today, how disgusting I look, because we could talk about that every time, really, couldn't we? So today we're talking about, why do we get depression? What causes it? What's the basis behind it? This gal has done some research and found out why for you. I've read some papers, I've been there, I've done it. If you're new here, by the way, this is Backseat Positivity. We basically discuss all things mental health, self-improvement, and I'm Dawn. I'm a doctor. I'm entrusted with people's lives. A very sweaty doctor at that. So this is actually a 2-part episode. Yes, this is the first 2-part episode, I think. And this first one is because I actually started off doing the episode as how do we prevent depression? Can we prevent it? And then I realised that you don't know how to prevent something unless you know what causes it. So I was like, wait there, hold up. And I thought, I thought, let's do what causes, because I actually did them together and I thought, fuck me, that's going to be a long episode. So let's split it up and let's get into it. So we start off with what causes depression, and then what day is it today? Monday. On Thursday, I shall be releasing therefore, how do we prevent it? And it's more than just me saying, well, drugs cause depression, so let's stop drugs. No, there's more to it than that. So I do advise, I recommend that you guys have a listen to the second one too, because I read a real good paper on it, let me put it that way. So, I have depression. I'm quite open about it, I'll tell you. I just did. So I have depression. I'm treated, medicated, signed, sealed, delivered. I'm fine. I've been stable for a very long time. I don't even know, was it 2023? Probably like 3 years, I would say, at least. And I'm just, I have my ups and down days. Don't get me wrong, I did an episode on how to cope with depressed days because I was going through a depressed day. Am I my own worst enemy sometimes? Yes, I am. But often I do things that help me. And look, education is everything. Knowing about all of this stuff is super useful and helps you just understand what's going on, prevent things in the future. My fucking face is like so red. I think I was wearing sunglasses. Yeah, I was. And I think I've got white eyes. So if you're listening on the podcast, just like the audio, you can go check out my YouTube channel or my Instagram. I might put it on there actually. I might just take a picture of this monstrosity. It might not even be that bad, but on the little screen where I can see myself, I honestly look really bad. So pray for me. I look like I've got a fever or something. I don't. Okay. So yeah, I have depression. I am on antidepressants for it and I'm A-okay. But realistically, is depression caused by a low or a lack of serotonin? We don't really know. And I guess that's the first thing I'm going to start with is we don't know whether we know that and I've done an episode on antidepressants as well. I'm just plugging all of my stuff. It all links together, okay? So you listen to one, you might go and listen to another. I've done an episode on antidepressants where I talked about the main antidepressants being SSRIs, which is acronym, mnemonic, I can't remember which one it is. But it basically means selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And it basically stops your brain from reabsorbing serotonin too quickly. So serotonin sort of hangs about in the neurotransmitter synapse, in the gap between them, and somehow makes you happy. I don't know. We don't know. We don't know if it's kind of hard to measure serotonin levels in your brain. as such. I mean, you can obviously do like head scans and stuff like that, but it doesn't specifically measure serotonin activity or levels. You can measure it in the blood, but again, that doesn't necessarily indicate what's going on in the brain, because certain chemicals can and can't cross the blood-brain barrier. I believe serotonin is one that does, because you make a lot of serotonin in your gut and then it needs to make its way up to your head. So it would make sense that it goes across. It's not something I've actively researched, but like, fucking makes sense, doesn't it? So let's call that a day. So what we know is that they help. We know that SSRIs, serotonin medication, helps with depression, as well as other things like talking therapies. Now, what we know is that it helps, the medications help relieve the symptoms of depression, but the therapy helps you helps you get out of the sort of negative habits and the negative thinking patterns that maybe could have gotten you into it, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it basically stops you from sliding back into that hole as soon as you come off medication, if you choose to do so. Now, I've been on medication for quite a long time. I would say it's like 3 to 5 years. I can't remember. I am coming down slowly. I feel like I'm getting there. I'm quite a sensitive gal to medication and I get withdrawal symptoms, so I am coming down off them. Maybe I'll do an episode on that, coming off antidepressants, because I've done it once, then I was back on them. So I have experience in that field, and also my medical knowledge as well, so they kind of go hand in hand pretty well. So what we don't know is whether low serotonin levels are due to depression, whether they're caused by something and then you get depression, or whether you have depression and then the depression, that sort of, I don't want to call it a disease process, but I guess a disease process, the depression causes a low serotonin. We don't know. So that's up for debate. I am going to hazard a guess. I mean, it's 50-50 or neither. So, it could be infinite odds. I'm going to hazard a guess that, I don't know. I was going to go for the first one. I thought maybe the first one would be a good one to go for. As in, we have low serotonin and then we get depression. But now I'm not sure. Now I'm changing my mind. So, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you think chicken or egg? What came first? The low serotonin levels or the depression? Interesting. And I think, I've written here, if we know what causes things, then we know how to prevent it. But I've literally just said to you that we don't know what the neurotransmitter, I guess. Oh, that was like a really weird reverse burp and it didn't happen. I've literally just said to you, we don't know which way round it is. So I'm going to scratch that comment out. I'm actually going to actively do it. But there are obviously things that we can do to reduce the reduce the prevalence of depression and reduce the prevalence of prevent it from again. But let's get into it. So they've talked about specific and non-specific risk factors. I am not entirely sure what makes a risk factor specific and non-specific, but I think let's just ignore that, and I don't think we need to know. But let's just get into the risk factors. Okay. Because there are quite a few that I think would surprise people. I'm not just saying that to be like, the results will surprise you and make you listen to the end. Like, I'm actually, it did make me think. I mean, I knew quite a few of them already by doing, obviously my own research in, because that's what my podcast is about, right? Mental health and self-improvement and stuff. But also just by having depression and also being a doctor. So I already kind of knew some of these, but I think there are some on here that, people wouldn't think of because they don't deal in the medical matters. So let's assume, right, we've ruled out some medical causes. Now, I've put medical causes on here because I'm a doctor. I think of these things, right? Now, there are certain drugs that a side effect might be depression. For instance, when I got fully diagnosed. I don't know whether it was fully diagnosed. When I went back onto medication, or maybe I went on it the first time, I got diagnosed because I was on this drug called Roaccutane, which, if you don't know, is an acne medication that well, not a lot, but quite a few teenagers go on. It's like a vitamin A something, I can't remember, but it basically makes you dry AF. You're like a little prune. All of your lips are dry, your nose is bleeding because it's so dry, your skin's really dry, you're like constantly fucking moisturising. I was like a big bowl of, like a big walking Vaseline human, like constantly putting lip balm on. People must have thought I had some kind of problem, which I guess I did. But one of the side effects of it, and I had really bad back pain as well, and hip pain. One of the side effects of it, it's unknown if it causes depression, or whether it's the side effects, or whether it's the population that take the medication, because a lot of teenagers, young people have depression, and a lot of teenagers and young people are taking this medication. They also have acne, which alters their self-esteem. Then they have back pain. So what is it really that causes it? Nobody knows, but basically there's been a higher instance of depression in people taking isotretinoin is the drug name, but Roaccutane is the brand name, and that's how most people know it as. Anyway, it's a pretty fucking savage drug, I'm not gonna lie. If you want me to do an episode on that, I can, but I mean, I've basically just summarised it in like a minute. And I got really depressed on it. I mean, I'm not saying it was due to that. I'm just saying I happened to be depressed on it. Basically, somebody in my family died. Again, I've talked about that in my podcast. And then I basically like sort of spiraled from a mental health perspective and didn't stop it because I didn't know how. So it was like, cool, just reach rock bottom and then let's see what happens there. But so those are the kind of drugs. You can get drugs that cause depression. I've also I don't want to like scare anyone, okay? Some of these are most of them are very rare causes of depression, but brain tumour or stroke, or just any kind of space-occupying lesion in the brain, or some kind of alteration in the brain, can cause mood disturbances or personality change. But very, very rare if you are my age and you've just heard me say that, and you know, with a brain tumour or a stroke, you're going to have other symptoms. You're not just going to be depressed, okay? You're going to have like limb weakness or problems speaking or word finding difficulties or visual changes. You know, most likely, you're not just going to be depressed and have a brain tumour. You know, it's not unheard of, but it's extremely rare, and I just want to point that out. I don't want people going, oh my God, Dawn said I could have a brain tumour, so can I get a head scan, please? No, you are fine, probably. And hypothyroidism it doesn't necessarily cause depression, so it's like an underactive thyroid, most people would call it, but it can make you really sleepy, really tired, really lethargic, and I think that can kind of mimic the symptoms of depression. So some people might think they're depressed, or other things are like anemia, poor diet, or dietary deficiencies. So it's always worth, you know, if you're vegetarian or you have other health problems or you have other symptoms, like physical symptoms in particular, like think maybe like dry skin or like brittle, like really dry hair or something like that, that probably like won't be caused by depression, then it might just be worth going to your doctor and just getting that checked out. But for the most part, most of us are just going to have bog standard normal depression. Yay! And just good old normal depression. So basically, nothing, you know, physical or organic is causing it. There's also something called seasonal affective disorder, which is basically when it's winter, you don't see enough of the sun and it makes you depressed. Now, I don't know if that's because of a low vitamin D or if that's to do with your circadian rhythm and brain hormones in the brain, but that is another form of depression. That's not particularly what I'm talking about today, because obviously the cause of that is lack of sunlight. But I just want to point these other things out, just, to be aware of. You can get those lights for seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, kind of ironically called SAD. So there are other things, lack of sleep. I mean, these are things that we can, fix, right? But lack of sleep, lack of exercise, doing certain drugs, I mean recreational drugs here, especially alcohol, that's very depressed, and our mood very low. Now everybody thinks, woo, it makes me really happy because I'm so fucking fun when I'm drunk. I'm like rolling on the floor and everyone thinks I'm hilarious. That's your inhibitions, my love. That is not your happiness. You've lost your inhibitions, you have not gained any happiness, okay? And actually it has very much the opposite effect, and you will be sad the next day, or anxious in my case, or both. And okay, so now we've got that out of the way, let's talk about risk factors. Number 1, first degree relative. My family members, it runs in the family, depression. Like, I was set up for failure, really. The only person that's not depressed is probably my dad. I don't know, I haven't asked him, to be fair, but he's a pretty happy guy. But my whole, mum side of the family is, have issues with mental health, I would say. Diagnosed or otherwise, let's put it that way. Some of them might be in denial, but there's a very, the thing is, right, we don't know if it's genetic. I'm sure there is a genetic element to it. But the other thing is environmental. So you're brought up in that, kind of depressive, negative atmosphere. And it's not to say, that's, you're all crying all day. And it's just, having a more negative outlook on life, different ways you cope with stressors, and you're gonna pick that up as a learned way to cope with things and way to think about things. That's just a natural thing that you're going to do. We learn from our parents, we learn from our grandparents, we learn from our friends, so that's just a normal thing to do. And there's not been a specific gene that's been discovered that causes depression as such, but the fact there is a heavily strong familial link. I would say a lot of that would probably be circumstantial, as in environmental. I don't know if I use too many significant words or not, long words, but I would say a lot of that is your circumstances, basically. So you're in circumstances that if your mum is depressed, then she will put you inadvertently, not on purpose, but she's not like, I will give you depression, child. But it's you're going to pick up those kind of, crying at maybe minor things, or a tendency to comfort eat, or maybe just not exercise as much. Do you know what I mean? Bringing in their habits into your life. And we are just replicas of our parents, aren't we? It's kind of scary. So having a first degree relative, very indicative of whether you are going to have depression or not. Now, it would be interesting to see if there is a gene. We have only just, within the past, I think it was 20 years or something, maybe 40, not that long ago, 20 years, 40 years, sequenced the whole human genome. So I think I'm making kind of obvious predictions here, but if you're in the medical field, there's going to be some kind of gene therapy coming out. I mean, there already is, but whether we're going to start treating, or maybe just treating embryos, questionably, or whether we're going to start modifying our own genes, which is very much harder to do. But it's definitely something that's been thought about, especially with genetic conditions, cystic fibrosis, for example. It's a contentious subject, but it's fucking cool, isn't it? You can go in, modify your genetic makeup, and then start expressing different proteins and stuff like that, and that, and then you could produce more serotonin or less receptors or something like that. That's kind of what I'm thinking, but who knows? Another risk factor, I wouldn't really say this is a risk factor as such, because it's more like a predisposition, right? So in this paper they said if you have more symptoms which don't cross the diagnosis threshold, that one's kind of obvious. If you're borderline mild depression, you're more likely to tip into moderate or major depression. Another thing is having previous depression. I mean, fucking duh. Like, obviously, you're more likely to have it again. It's the same with any disease. If you have, I don't know, an asthma attack, you're going to be more likely to have an asthma attack than I am because I don't have asthma. Also, this I think is extremely important. Listen up. I think a big part of it is, and whether it's learned or not, which it probably is, but it's basically how our brains think and in terms of cognitive patterns. So I'm sweating so much. I'm so sorry, it's disgusting. It's really fucking hot. It's probably not that hot to like most people, but it's hot to the UK. Hey Siri, what's the temperature? It's 22, but it hit 29 today, and that's fucking boiling, let me tell you. So, and it's 70% humidity right now, and it's 10:30 at night. So, I'm sorry, I keep going on about it. So, cognitive patterns. I literally did an episode like 1 episode ago. Not even whatever. It was literally like, not yesterday, last week. And it was about automatic negative thoughts. That is a cognitive pattern. That is a pattern where if we have a situation, oh no, I spilt my water bottle, for example. I haven't, don't worry. Calm yourselves. Then I'm like, oh my God, some people are going to think I'm really stupid and clumsy, and just going into those automatic negative thoughts. That is a cognitive pattern. And if you get into that cognitive pattern, and you might have picked that up through just experience or through listening to your peers or parents from, them saying that maybe out loud or just the way they've reacted to stuff, you're going to have picked that up. And the other thing is, I quite like this word, depressogenic behaviours. Basically, behaviours that are indicative of developing depression or exacerbating it. So, for example, eating shit food, going to bed at a terrible time, drinking lots of alcohol when you feel sad, comfort eating, just behaviours that are going to, make depression worse or are going to induce it, I suppose. So those were the specific risk factors. Who knows what specific means, as already discussed. Secondly is the non-specific ones. These ones are sort of circumstances of how you've grown up and what you've been exposed to. I guess maybe specific is me as a person, and then non-specific is more like my environment. I think that makes sense. So people who are poor are more likely to be depressed or have mental health problems. Now, it doesn't mean that it doesn't necessarily link to it, but people who are poor, as a general rule, they might do more drugs, they might drink more alcohol, they might smoke, they might be more chronically stressed, because if you can't pay your bills and stuff like that, it's a bit shit. And I know, don't worry, I understand. Currently in that position. So there's a lot of things surrounding poverty. It's not like no money equals depression. It's what does no money mean? Well, it means that you have a lower access to healthcare. So you might not have, you might have more chronic pain because you can't get your hip done or whatever if you're older. Or you can't access, so people who are poorer generally tend to have lower access to healthcare. That's just how it is. It's called the inverse care law. If you want to go check it out, fucking be my guest. But it's basically, I've already described it. I don't need to describe it again. So yeah, if you are poorer, I'm not being stereotypical here, or maybe I am, but I'm just I don't want to sound judgmental by being poorer people are less well educated. That's not me wanting to sound or be judgmental or even, being judgmental. It's just a fact. I'm just explaining the fact to you. Okay, so I don't want you to think that I'm looking down on people who don't have lots of money. I would say that I don't have lots of money and I did not come from a rich background. So I'm kind of in that boat. I managed to get out of that situation just by getting a good education. I was quite lucky, really, and I'm quite forthcoming with trying to get places in life, I suppose. So what does that even mean? Like, that means I'm quite, I can't even think of the word, like, not enthusiastic, but like driven. I think that's the word. So yeah, like I said, poverty definitely has a strong link to other mental health problems. It's also just, you know, if you have a lack of education, you have fewer job prospects generally, lower earning potential. There's just so many things in that, and it doesn't mean that money buys you happiness, because there are plenty of depressed and lonely people that are rich too. But if you are comfortable, and if you don't need to worry about how you're going to pay your rent and whether you can go to university or not, that is a big relief. You're not stressed about that, and that is, you know, quite comfortable. So that's kind of where that comes from. Violence and abuse. I feel like that one kind of speaks for itself. If you're subjected to violence, in particular sexual violence as a child, you are much, much, much more likely to have depression or other mental health problems as an adult or, you know, teenager. That's just, I don't think that one needs explaining, does it? The fact that if you're abused, you're more likely to, you know, be depressed, and that might be because you have a lot of guilt. Yes, people who have been abused feel guilty. It's kind of like a weird backwards guilt. And it might be because they have PTSD. So yeah, that one I don't think I necessarily need to go into. But then we have this predisposition to being depressed, okay, through all of those things, all of those causes. And then I think what pushed me over the edge to getting depressed was firstly being on that medication, which didn't help. Oh my God, I'm so sweaty. I literally can't fucking cope with it. I'm nearly done, I promise. And then you won't have to listen to me moaning about my sweat. So the thing that tipped me over the edge was basically, like I said, that bereavement. And it was a very complicated grief because of my childhood surrounding that, is in a vague sense. And the death was very confusing for me. I was kind of sad, but not really. And that's a confusing place to be. So I was on Roaccutane, and then I think all of these things just kind of surmounted and then tipped me over the edge, basically. I also was like 21, maybe, I think. So I just didn't know how to save myself from that situation. And that's, I guess, what I'm kind of hoping to help you guys with, is how do we try and save ourselves from diving straight into the pit of hell of depression? So that's coming up in the next episode. How do we prevent depression? We've highlighted all the causes, and on Thursday we will be going into how we prevent it. So thanks so much for listening, guys. I'm sorry I mentioned my sweat so much. If you can see me on the video, you will get it. You'll understand why I'm talking about it so much. And if you liked it, please give it a like or a 5-star rating if you're listening on the podcast. And if you are just listening on the podcast, if you want to watch the video, which I'm sure you don't, because I basically just described how sweaty I am through the whole thing. But if you want to, it's on my YouTube channel. You can just type Backseat Positivity into YouTube, or you can type in my name, which is Dawn Barlow. My tag handle thing is @DawnBarlow. And I'll see you in a couple of days. I love you. Bye. That should be my jingle.